everyone. Okay, we'll just wait for a few more viewers to come and then we can get started here. There's a ton of confluence around 305, 309, so I'm just waiting to see. I was watching the 3 o'clock window to see if they would break the channel, and they clearly didn't. I was hoping they'd break ahead of 3 o'clock, but there are more odds just after 3 at 305 and 309. So this is a very, very, very important window, because if they don't break or clear the channel, I would say, during this time period, then this likely could just become pinnable back at like opening ranges, closing ranges. Does that make sense to you guys? Like on the daily, for instance, like they could just take it back to like these prior highs, like where they engulf this. So like right above here, this is kind of like the area that they're stalling. Obviously, we want to get back to like the 6950s, right? Because 6952, 58, 61, those were like the 50% ranges that we talked about in the report. I know that these ranges probably changed now since we had all this this volatility to the downside, but now those areas are closer to like 6921. Do you see what I'm saying? So if they wanted to make it pinnable, they could keep it between like 6922 to 6932, 6945 basically. If they decide that they want to take this a little bit higher, then we'd be looking for like those 6950s and 60s. That's what could basically reset the week, because remember, that's kind of what started this volatility in the first place, is when they failed to get back to those areas there. And if they did something like that, then we have odds of taking out all-time highs or retesting them as early as tomorrow. That 7-day could be the first engulfing pattern that we have, and the final day on this one is tomorrow. So they've already hit more than 50%, so we do want to stay above 69.25. Do you see this? But usually you want to get at least over a 66% ratio, so for that to happen. So like closer to like those 69.60s if we hit even around there. So there's definitely some overhead here. 75% of this range would be back to like 6980. I don't think we need to get that high today specifically, but if they at least sustained above 6920s and cleared the channel, then we have some pretty high odds of getting back to the zone tomorrow and maybe retesting those highs. Otherwise, they could keep this sideways in between these ranges and maybe just flag between like the 23rd and the 3rd, which would kind of extend us for those month-end odds. And that's fine too. Like those month-end odds would make sense if they did something like that. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like if they decided that they wanted to, what did I do here? If they decided they wanted to just keep this sideways from the 23rd until February 1st or 2nd or something like that, since we have a lot of inside ranges that are stuck until end of the month, which some of these broke the inside range, like 8-day, 9-day, they're no longer inside. Do you guys see that? But they could be continuation flags that extend till the 29th. So dynamics did change a bit. Our 8-day, 9-day are no longer inside. And if they want to have this be a continuation trend, they're required to take out the highs. Does that make sense? Like for this 9-day to continue, you'd have to take out this high before the 29th. Okay, so highs would have to be taken out before the 29th. So meaning you'd have to come back, retest 70.36, which would give us our odds of getting 70.41.38. Does that make sense? Like if they were to do something like that. In terms of range, it would be the same thing as like that 223, 227, 226 points off these lows. Isn't that insane? Remember how we said like those 227 areas, 225? That's what I talked about on the stream on Monday. And that's why I was trying to explain to you guys why 6810, right? 6814 area has confluence. Do you see it? Because it's like that 226 to 227 point ranges that we've been seeing a lot of lately. This right here. I talked about it on the stream. So that was like, if they fail, maybe they give us like 227 point ranges instead. So this is really interesting because that would basically be 227 points back up off these lows. And when I talked about this on Sunday, I showed you guys this. I was like, oh, if they decide to take this down 227 to 222 points, do you see it? That's 222. This is exactly 222 points off those highs. Isn't that nuts? So if they recycle it and instead take it on the upside, okay, maybe they want to do the 227 instead. Does that make sense? And that could get us our 70.41. But they'd have to have some relative strength. And like the strength would have to occur obviously before the 29th, but the earliest odd would be as early as tomorrow since this flips on the 23rd. So to engulf, I don't know if they have that much strength to do that, but a lot of these are engulfing patterns now. This has odds for the 26th. The 9-day would just be a potential continuation until the 29th, so 28th. There's multi-flips on the 26th and 27th, so I do feel like the 26th and 27th probably have the highest odds in terms of this, but this is like 1, 2, 3, 4 exhaustion, 5, 6. Do you see what I'm saying? And that could be like the 7th bar flip right here. On a daily range, we are within 131 points. So obviously breaking 132, 133 is more preferred, which would get us that break of the channel. Our averages have been closer to 134 and 135 and a half, which makes sense because if they broke 134, 135 and a half, then they would break the channel. Do you see this? So currently we're only hitting around 131 and a half or 130. And last time we had these range breaks, I don't know if you guys remember this from like the January 5th candle to our highs, it was like around 136. This is when they started stalling, like 113, 135 from yearly open. Do you guys see that? So if they did clear closer to 135 off like the yearly open to yearly highs, that would give us a break above 69.49, 69.50. So it is preferred if they did something like that, but that's going to be relative to, I think, what they do over the next like few minutes. So let's go back to here. So do you guys see though how it could become pinnable between 6922, 6925, 6932 if they don't start turning it around here? So far between that 05 to 09, they didn't really do much, but they did keep it above 6925. Okay, so I'm going to document that because this was kind of like the overhead or support. And there is another odd around 312. So if they really want to try turning this around, they definitely have to do so. Post this 312 mark. And I think the next odds we had here was 318. I didn't mark them, but this was the earliest point for an attempt to try turning it back around. And also off like the morning lows. I didn't really look too much off like the overnight lows, but these would be vital. So like closer to like 747, 748, 746 this morning. I'm going to copy paste these in here. 118, 413. Okay, so maybe some odds closer to like imbalance prints around like 338. Most of these are durational till session closes today, but There's some odds around imbalance around like 328, 338. And then some like right into the close. I don't know if you guys can see that. And this was aligned with that 242 interval too, which makes total sense because that was the period in time where they kind of tried reversing this back. You guys saw that? But do you see how most of these run until end of session today? And you see like the turnaround here. This was really important. Like look at this, around like 440, 442. These were like the earliest points where like they could try breaking this back. It was around like the 400-minute marks, closer to like 410. Okay, 409. Do you see this? You guys looking? Teaching you guys something very important here. Okay, and something I noticed is that they did it a little bit early. Okay, so like these odds were more aligned with like 742, 744, okay, 330, 230, 236. You guys paying attention? Let me put this in a different shade. Okay. This is where odds started to decrease just a little bit. Okay, when they couldn't clear. So, do you see this? In terms of these lows from overnight and the terms of the breaks. So I noticed that they did break technically a little bit early. The better odds were closer to like here, like probably closer to like 239. 242 was a really important point in the day. Same with 245. And specifically like off those low breaks. I would probably also look at the structures around like the 904 to 905, since that was the point in time that they cleared the channel, or like broke the channel. Does that make sense? So like maybe closer to like let's see, like this. You see how this kind of went inside? I would bet anything that these odds were closer to like our 307, 309. Look. Do you see that? $243. And that's a really nice flag on that too. Where, see, like a lot of these kind of extend until late in the session. And then even like the odds that were catered to, where was it? When they actually broke the channel here, and that was at like 910, 911. This right here. Do you see how there's still some odds? They're not the highest, but there is a tiny, tiny, tiny window. If you guys are listening here, this is how you can understand time against like your channel, your zones, structure breaks, okay? So maybe based on this, like some of these could stay stuck, but there are some frames where maybe this could come back in and have like a nice structure break. Okay, a lot of these are after the bell. If you see this, like you see the channel clearance here, guys, on this structure. I'm trying to show you guys something, because right now we're stuck in a channel, right? So this would make the most sense in terms of time, okay? Does that make sense to you guys? I don't usually share like details like this, but this is pretty important if you try looking at this from this kind of stance, okay? So maybe, see how there's like some odds on like these frames? A lot of these are after the bell, but there are some, and this was like the 3 o'clock flip here. There are some that give some odds closer to these imbalance prints, just like there was back here. And it's insane how like those odds off these breaks here are in alignment with like 305, 309, okay? Whereas the actual clearance here, this right here, let me maybe change these to a different color, okay? These odds right here are in alignment with imbalance prints. Do you see how that could give a potential odd for like end of day in terms of clearing the channel? But I would say that you'd probably have to sustain like this bull area that we talked about, like 6922, 6925. They did breach it a little bit. And we had some earlier breaks, so, and not by much, but by, let's see, like 12 to 15 minutes, okay? So, and like the better odds were closer to like 4.5, 4.8. So what that could mean is maybe these would be like the max cutoffs for like sustaining these lows or something like that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you don't really want to keep breaking structure around like 319, 320. And if we measure it off the actual highs that occurred, this was closer to like 23 to 33 minutes. So that could be maybe like the max durations of these. Meaning you would have to try turning things around after 330, 332. Otherwise, it's just going to stay stuck in this pinnable box range. There's definitely better odds for after the bell, but it's not that complicated. It's just trying to align price with time. That's it. And by price, I'm talking about the point theory, like using the channel or zones or price breaks or price structure or whatever. So in this instance, the most dumbed down way of thinking about this is basically these odds here are aligned to the channel clearance here, okay? So ES had the highest odds of clearing the channel back in here, which is an odd around here. And if they can't do it during this period here, then they don't really have any odds till after the bell. That's just the simplest way to put it. ES didn't really have high odds of clearing the channel during this period. They had odds of testing core ranges, and you can kind of see that based on what they did back in here and here, because these odds were more aligned with core. Does that make sense? So like these intervals in here are probably more aligned with these intervals back in here. In here. Yes. Or just a way of like looking at this. And I actually didn't measure, but I think it would be worth measuring to see like the time it took to get back to a channel here. Like, so maybe like between here, like roughly 188 to 189 minutes. And that is actually really cool because that time frame that I looked at was one, what was it? That one time frame with the channel behavior was like 188 or 182 or something like that. So that's actually really, really cool. Because look, from the time it took to actually clear the channel to the time it took to break down the channel was actually 182. Isn't that insane? That is actually crazy. Because that was the time frame I looked at for, where did it go? Hold on, for that, let me find it in here. For that 910, this, 910, that was exactly 182 minutes. Isn't that crazy, you guys? Look. That was the 910 break. That's the exact range or time it took to break back into the channel. That's insane. So you could maybe manually measure that too to see if those odds align there. So what does that say? Like 314. So far you can see like the kind of structure breaks. Those odds are probably declining. I would maybe measure from like the point in time that they brought it back above the channel. So probably like closer to like 324, 325. So like right now, if this starts breaking down, then you can kind of see your odds decrease. Does that make sense? So far based on the price action between this interval here and this interval in here, those odds are pretty low that they want to take it back to the channel from what I'm seeing. If we look at this maybe in terms of like when they finally cleared it and never brought it back beneath, most of these odds are after the bell. So the odds of that happening in real time heavily decrease. I just want to see if there's any correlation to that. Yeah, like a lot of these are after the bell. It's just an interesting way of looking at it from a time and price perspective. And look at that stick that was brought down at 318 too. So you can kind of see the, even like the reductions in terms of trying to keep those odds in play. Like if they would have maybe held above there, they could have taken it back above like 69.29, 69.30. So it seems like they want to try keeping it within these ranges here, with this window being likely the cutoff. Okay. So what do you guys think? You think that max ranges are in for the session today, or you think that they have an odd of trying to get to this 69.49, 69.52? That would be the 132 to 136 point intervals that ES has had a pretty common theme of doing over the last few weeks. If they did something similar to that, that would also take it out of the channel. I feel like odds really decreased personally after they brought it back down around that 309, 305 and then failed to retrace it back right here. I don't know if you guys saw that at 312. Like they took it to 69.33 but then stalled. Like I feel like the 312 needed some follow through price action. So even this right here, like you can see that 12 points alone is likely enough to have retested those highs. Do you see that? Between 312 and 318. Do you guys see the differentials here? Like that would have been enough to at least give it a odd of retesting that high. So I think they really started to reduce range here. And even right here at 328, that's another reduction. Same thing, if you measure off like 318, would have given it an odd of retesting 69.45. Off 312, same thing. That was your odd of 69.51, 52. So that being said, I think best case at this point would be to try keeping it closer to 69.20s and 30s into the close. It's not the worst case if they pin this close to like 69.05, 69.10, but that's going to keep that volatility present in terms of like keeping this back and forth, and maybe stuck until month end. So points and turnaround were closer to that 3 I usually watch 330, but odds today are closer to like 330, 338, but I'm just going to mark the 330 window anyway. Are you guys okay if I clear this a tiny bit? I'm going to try keeping this clean since I restarted it. There also was one tiny odd at 351, so that was the late day odd ahead of close. But most of these were after the bell, unless they do like an early break like they did back here. I think that those odds for real time are pretty low. Anyway, we were just looking for an engulfing back to the channel, so this is definitely more than enough range. 128 to 132 points is definitely more than enough range for this to suffice being capped out for the session today. Well, I'm saying depending on where you close. So what do you guys think? Where do you think they're going to pin this? You think that they give us some crazy price action into the close back to these ranges here? You guys think that they keep this at risk closer to like 6888, 6905, 6906? The worst but not absolute worst scenario is if they're going to keep it stuck in between here, I would almost rather they just take it back to like 68, 71, 78, to be honest with you, because that would probably give you a better odd. But then keeping it stuck in between like a bear and neutral zone. But ideally, we want to just get back above here into the close. Where's the closing point? Here. While I agree, right, but the period that had the highest odds to keep those swings alive was in here. Does that make sense? Like this window here, okay, this was the window to try keeping those odds alive for like a massive swing. Not that you can't get back to like these ranges, you could, but I think for like bigger swings, probably not after they killed off those odds, unless we get like some crazy end of day stick or something. I also didn't like how they stalled 69.33 at 312, because that was kind of the, it's kind of like a 50-50, because they did at least tag 6933, so they tried getting back into the channel, but they had no follow through. So my thoughts would be, if they're going to try again, you probably need to be back above 69.25 before 350. Does that make sense? Like you can't be still stuck down here and have odds of getting back here. I think that at the very least for these turnaround times. So here's our 33 stick, guys. So like this stick, for instance, is calculated. We'd probably want to get back above at least 69.14, right, to get out of this neutral range and try giving us some odds for, you know, our 335. I usually watch 336. I'm just going to mark it, even though odds are closer to 38 and 40 today. I would say by that 338, 340 window, you probably, for odds to be better since they decreased here, you probably want to get back to these areas here and try retesting 2.5, 3.1, 3.2 during this period. I think your cutoff would be 350, but it would be even better if you did it as early as this period here. I'm just going to mark the 5.4, 5.5 for close. So that was a really good turnaround stick for 333. That was our earliest odd right here. We'll see if they have enough momentum to try getting it back to 69.25, 26. Maybe as early as like that 336, 38 window. The the key differences I noticed here was 312 held 69.26. Do you guys see that? Whereas 318 was the stick that broke it. Do you guys see that? Like that 2526. So I think the risk is correlated with this 18 stick, to be honest. And that was the 50% of the range right here. Okay, so maybe the importance is going to be getting back above, let me mark these in green, getting back above that 18 stick, ideally as early as like 338, 340 period, okay, to give us some odds of retesting those highs during the last 10 minutes. Otherwise, it would just probably end up being a pinnable session around these spots here. Let's do a poll. Max range for real-time session today. Highs are in 69.48, 69.49, 69.50 to 69.52, 69.55 to 69.58. I'll set that for 5 minutes. And then I'll do another poll for max range on silver. Also hit targets too. And look, these exact ranges for flip dates on that clearance break to like $96 that we talked about. Gold is getting super close to that 4,915. This is kind of like the next clearance spot on this. I haven't really measured these intervals recently, but you can kind of see these clearance breaks above here. I don't have them marked, but you could mark them if you want. Like off these candles. Off that recent low right here, this one here, do you guys see that? That's a really good hold. If you measure off like the actual highs that occurred, they already broke range, so I don't see how this can't extend, basically. And on average, every time they've extended, it's been about 300 points in range. Between there and like 260, 265. Do you see that? So my thoughts were these would be the areas they'd have to clear. Like right here. And I think that's where they're just getting stuck. Do you see it? Kind of like close to here. I'll update my gold chart tonight, but it's basically around this point here. I guess there could be a tiny bit of overhead around this 03, 09, but there's a lot of overhead there. So far this PA around that 38 mark, stalling right here, this is definitely implying that they want to try keeping this pinnable in these ranges. And like I said, if they can't get it back above here at max cutoff, like during this 350 range, then I don't see how they could have odds of retesting those ranges. Can we get more votes, guys, please? It's also good to see what others think. There still is some time, but the market would have to get really working. How many points have they moved off high so far? 40. Okay, so maybe if they hold like a 44 point ratio, they could recycle a little bit higher, but I feel like those odds are not that high. So, do you see what I meant? like how this period here between 312, 318 really reduced those odds, even though we had big swings today. But you have to also remember that max range is a thing, right? So if market already met this many points, it doesn't really have to go any higher than that. Like, measurement of range is also very crucial. Like, yes, we had a lot of swings today, but they were still calculated swings. Does that make sense? Like, they're big swings, but it's 131 points. Like, that's not a coincidence. There's a reason why they stalled it where they stalled it. I didn't measure off real-time lows, but even real-time lows are like 107 points. Like, even that is not a coincidence. Off real-time open, which I think was like closer to this 5-2 area. This is probably close to like that 88 to 94 point ratio. It is. Do you see what I'm saying? So they're still struggling here, and it's pretty obvious. The only good thing is they're holding 69.05, but they did breach it a tiny bit. Which, breaching 69.05 is putting us at risk of 69.02, 69.88. Okay, because now we're at risk of like a bear neutral zone. And we really just want to try getting back above 69.20, so that doesn't really leave much room for us anyway. Uh, 650 or 351 is an actual flip, so these ones here are just generic times that I'm going to watch. Do you guys see why the 305 to 309 was so important this afternoon? Like, this here essentially helped us determine, you know, maybe the kind of trend that we would get. I think 318 was more of the confirmation of this in terms of range, how they could look to close the session, whether they can make this pinnable. And I think even the measurement in terms of like those 27-minute intervals really helped. Also, when I measured off like the 227 stick to highs, okay, do you see this? I noticed that was 85 points. So maybe if they wanted to try pushing, like, there could have been a capped range there. So that was another interesting factor. That 135 point ratio is also the same thing as an 88 point break off this candlestick. But those time intervals being cut off from there also helped in terms of this. And that was basically the exact range in time that they took to clear here and to hit these highs. And these being more of like the cutoff. That was also aligned with 38 minutes. Do you see that? That was off 305. This is a really interesting theory right here. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm saying, but like between the time it took to clear and then to bring it back above. So there was a lot of pressure to basically hold the channel around 305 is what I'm trying to say. And pressure to clear it as early as like a 18 to 21 minute interval, okay? Or like as early as like a 9 to 10 minute interval based on these timestamps here, which is why when it moved like this, do you see that? You see how it moved so quick? These were the 18-minute intervals here. Do you see it? That was when it cleared the channel. That's the same thing as this, hitting those highs. Isn't that insane? And then look, from them taking it back, it was also around 18, 19 minutes. So like off here, off these highs. You can see that they're around like that 309, 305. So out of my way, I'm talking specifically to you. That was a really good way of seeing how odds were reduced, okay? Or range was at least minimized. Because these periods around 305, 308, 309, 312 had the highest pressure to basically clear the channel or sustain the channel or whatever the case was in correlation to here when this price action happened around there. Try doing these observations on your own and see if you can pick up anything on like by yourself. Even like this range in time is insane, that this was like 189 to 182 minutes. Like that's actually crazy. And the fact that that 182 flipped off that 4-2 break, which was the exact time that they took to get it to the top of the channel, like that's insane. I know I didn't really stream the fun parts, but I hope this was at least helpful in like managing your end of day positions or trying not to overtrade this once we had those expectations kind of set. The only other thing that could have happened, let's say they had great price action around 305, they fully cleared. That's when we could have maybe started seeing those scenarios where they could engulf this as early as tomorrow, right? So that would be like, they'd probably have to break at least 150-ish points. Like that would be half of 346, 347. That would have put like our 69, 58, 69, 64, 66 areas back in play. Does that make sense? The best case scenario would have been if they broke 173 points off these lows. And guess what, guys? Which is half of 346. That would have taken us back to the zone. Do you see what I'm saying? Like none of these areas holding is a coincidence. Like the fact that that's 698788 is insane, by the way. So 6987, 6988 confluence is 173 points off these lows, okay? That would have been the case if they had some crazy price action occur between like 305, they sweep the channel. Do you get what I'm saying? And then if they had like similar PA to what they did back here, like in here, because look, this is when they sweep the channel, right? And then they took out 6950, 6960, 6866, okay? If they did something similar around this period here, then we had very high odds of getting maybe to the zone. That could have been our capped range, which would have been 173 points. That's why I was saying earlier, technically they could have some odds of getting it as high as 6988, but there's going to be a lot of pressure just before and just after 3. Otherwise, the expectations would be that they'd probably just keep it stuck or situated around here. But now you guys are prepared for tomorrow in case they did something like that tomorrow. With the conditions, obviously, that they'd have to pin above 6925, ideally over like 33. How much time do we have left? 10 minutes? So let's see. There was better odds around the 351 window. Most odds today were better after the close, so like most of these are all after the bell. I just want us to try getting back above 69.25, 27 into the close. I feel like that'll reduce risk and keep odds of 6988. Maybe all-time high odds retesting as early as tomorrow. I don't like completely taking away odds, even though I know like there's higher odds for like the 26th and 27th and 28th. I think it's still good to kind of keep those probabilities in play. I don't like completely getting rid of them. Also, if you look at the 9-day and you measure like the mid-range, so mid-range in time between here and here would be like right here. Do you see that? So tomorrow, that's a 50% time interval. So technically that could be the earliest off that 9-day break, which is also the 7-day final day in terms of engulfing, which is the earliest engulfing period that we have. We're also tracking our 4-day still, which also flips on the 27th, and we're trying to avoid like a bear flag from forming here, because that's what could put us at those deeper risks of getting back to 6771, 6766. So far 350, trying to back test both ends of this trade. Right down to 6905 and still beneath 6914. Okay, where do you guys think they're going to pin this close today? Give me a pin into the close. So we already know that they still kept odds, unfortunately, alive of retesting our zone areas since they breached 05. And it's probably even risk to reward here now, because I think they've limited it basically within the zone. And specifically if they don't turn around by like 354, 355. Even the 350 being beneath 14 implies that they're going to keep this risk alive. I would prefer that they try holding 6901, 02, 04, and then retracting back by like 354, 55. At least to give some odds of like, even just pinning close to like here would be okay. This is where I want us to pin, but we'll see. So give me your thoughts, guys. Give me a number. 69, 05, 09 are they're still linked with our core ratios, and it kind of stays within that neutral theme. So I wouldn't really be surprised if they pinned within this yellow area either. This is just more preferred from like a ratio perspective. But again, I don't think that that would be probable unless they get back above, let's say 69, 14, 18 by like 354, 355. Okay, let's do another one in the close. 6903 to 6906, 6909 to 6913, 6914 to 6918, 6920, 6923, 6925, 6932. I'm just going to make that a little bit widespread. Obviously, this could be lower, but we'll just put these as probabilities because I feel like these are the higher probabilities, but I could be wrong. I don't really think that they would have taken out the channel to pin it back at 6888, but I could obviously be wrong. Can we get some votes, guys? I only set it for 5 minutes so that everyone can vote before the close. So my thoughts are if they can take out 6918 by this window here, then there could still be some odds of getting it back above 6925. Otherwise, they're maybe going to keep this neutral within these ranges. That would put a lot of pressure for the 5-4, 5-5 sticks. So basically, they need back above 6918. 6921. We said the 5-4 stick needs at least a retest of that 12-13 area. So far that's stalling. Oops. Can we get more votes, guys? I'm gonna watch the 30-second interval here too, because that is important. They never cleared 14 before 55, so that puts a lot of pressure and definitely reduces odds, I would say, of like keeping it maybe situated within the neutral ranges instead. Do you guys see how those odds were reduced after they stalled neutral ranges here? So they're trying really hard to maybe keep it between this area. I still want them to hold above 69.02 though, which is why I put 69.03 as like the minimum, but I don't really want them taking it to pin it down here. I feel like that would not be helpful for odds into tomorrow, but we'll see if they can try recovering the last like 2 minutes. I'm glad that we saw how pinnable this was though after those odds reduced, because I feel like that kind of a move this afternoon, a lot of people probably caught some FOMO in terms of them getting it back to those ranges. Whereas we knew that this period stalling implied that they could make this pinnable, like in these zone areas here, especially if they failed 69, 24, 25, 26, like this range in here. Yeah, I wouldn't expect something super exciting, to be honest, Elgo, because most of our odds are after the bell. It's not about profit taking, it's more about like that 68.90 is not that calculated. Okay, 69.06 is more calculated. Okay, 69.01, 69.03. So I don't think that they would. That's also 44 points off highs. They also stalled 85 to 88 points off the 227 stick, if you were listening. So like this 227 stick, when it broke range, it hit 89 or not, something like that, 88, 89 points. I don't remember exactly what it was, 85 points. Okay, so if you did like half that range, there's like about a 3-point offset. So I was thinking like if you did something like half that range, that could limit the kind of range that they take it down by. Does that make sense? So like 42.5 points. Are you listening? So 42.5. Even though I know we could go to 44, they might be closer to like 42.5 points. Do you see what I'm saying? I know this is a really weird way of looking at it, but this is what I was trying to explain earlier. That's why I figured they might hold 69.01, 69.03. Make sense? And it's the same thing. If they were to bring range back up, they could use that 3-point differential or whatever it is between here and here on upside, which is probably the difference between the highs and the top of the channel. It's about like 3.5 to 3.75 points. That's a difference of like that 88-point range. Okay, so I think if they hold 69, it's not exactly 69.03. It's like 69.0275. Okay, basically. I know I said 03, but that's the actual level. Then they can actually have an odd of getting it back to 69.25. Or at least neutralizing it, right? And by getting it back to 69.25, I mean like after the close. Like they would have odds at least still present for after the bell, since most odds for this are after the close anyway. So 4 o'clock trying to break here. We had a 69.11 close for real time. That's not bad. That's pretty expected on a 69.03 hold. And this can still keep odds in play for after the session today. I would obviously love if they can get the session close back above 69.21, 20.25, but even if they keep it in this neutral range, that's fine. It just means that that neutral risk is still going to be in play, meaning we can still keep getting more of these two directional days, okay? Because neutral to neutral just means back and forth PA. Any questions before I sign off, guys, or are you guys good to go? Do you understand that 69.0275 hold? You can think of it as like a 43 to 44 point hold off highs, or you can think of it as like the half range between these structural break sticks to highs. So kind of like holding like a 50% range between there. And it's also holding our area that I always call like playing with fire. Like I don't really want to get back beneath 69.02. But that being said, this can limit the range. We can go with like 17 points, both above and below. So above and below these areas here is why 69.20. Do you see that? There's some limitations here. Do you see what I'm saying? And why there was limitations this afternoon. Do you see that? The last like hour, half hour, look, they really limited range because they knew that both ends were capped, okay? So it was kind of stuck in between. They're not going to take it down to 688788, but they also weren't going to break 69.19, 69.20. And then the ranges above would be getting it back to basically the channel, which is anywhere between like 6933, 34, 35. That's going to be more ideal for us anyway. If we measure like exact ratios, they're closer to like 15-ish points, so maybe closer to like 3334, which would be coming back to try breaking that 312 stick in like the areas that failed back in here, and also sustainment of the zone. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. Maybe review the session and study this tonight. We'll see where they end up closing the actual session. There was a lot of odds after the bell, like close to like 336, 345, but even if they just kind of keep this zone bound, that's fine. You can also think of this too as like they're still trying to sustain 103 to 107 points into the close. So like getting back over 107 points would be back to core. These would be like our core ratios, even though they're off a neutral level, like 68.14. They would still be some core ratios if they were to bring it back to these areas here. Off opening range, these are closer to like 74, 79 points. So same thing, if they were to get this back 88 points off open, it would be closer to getting back over the, like that 69, 26, 28, which is the areas that we really needed to sustain this afternoon to get back or even have an odd of taking out the highs. So overnight conditions are going to be, we want to probably try holding off the zone. Okay. Sustaining lows here at 69.01, 69.0275 is going to be ideal for us, and getting back above 69.14. I really want us to close above 69.21, ideally 2.425. Bigger overhead is closer to 2.8 and 3.3. Getting back into the channel overnight is going to really help mitigate risk and give us the highest odds of at least retesting 69.88 as early as tomorrow. Getting back to 69.88 as early as tomorrow would give us an odd of that 70.24, 70.22, 70.28 retest. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have the highest odds of taking out the all-time high and getting to 70.41, but it would at least keep that retest odd alive. Staying stuck in these ranges here would probably limit us closer to that 70.58, 70.64, basically means bound, okay? So a lot of this is just going to be relative to where they end up closing this into the session here, but also where they sustain overnight. I will see you guys tomorrow. And today is what, Tuesday or Wednesday? Today is Wednesday. Yeah, I'll probably issue some notes tonight. I think notes tonight would be good. just to kind of go over the different structures and stuff that we have and the odds that we have in play. But nonetheless, the 21st was the most important flip date for the week, so I wasn't surprised to see this kind of PA and this crazy price action and range. And even earlier this afternoon, I was saying, like, I wouldn't completely take away odds of us engulfing, because technically we could get some new sticks and they still held the channel. It would have been ideal that they broke, you know, before 2, but even like the breaks here before 2:30 still gave some really good odds. But that being said, it put a lot of pressure of like breaking the zone. Do you see what I'm saying? Like they literally broke the zone on that stick back over 6,888. So there was a lot of pressure on that one stick, and it was met. Otherwise, we probably would have been closer to like just staying stuck at core ranges this afternoon. If they really want to have made this a pinnable session and we didn't get any news, they could have just kept it pinnable in between these areas here too. So